Hello everyone, and welcome to my The Bold Fans channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Electra has always been a dreamer. Growing up in a tiny village, she spent her childhood scribbling patterns in the margins of her notebooks, dreaming of a life where she could create beauty and her name would have meaning. Los Angeles had beckoned to her like a siren, promising fame, love, and the opportunity to make her imprint. For a while it had delivered. She had clawed her way into the fashion industry, with her creations appearing on runways and magazine covers. She'd met Will, a man whose calm power and unshakable faith in her had left her feeling invincible. But as she discovered, dreams were not free. The previous year had been a blur of successes and betrayals. Her current collection was a success, but it came at a high cost. Rivals in the sector had propagated rumors, harmed her reputation, and taken away opportunities that should have been hers. Friends she had trusted had deserted her, drawn by the allure of fame or the sting of jealousy. And Will, darling Will, was caught in the crossfire. He had stood by her through every late-night breakdown and moment of doubt, but the strain was beginning to show. His eyes, once brilliant with promise, now cast a shadow of tiredness. Electra turned from the balcony, her bare feet smooth on the cool hardwood floor. Will sat on the couch with his laptop open, his brow furrowed as he scanned through emails. He looked up, sensing her presence, and smiled briefly but not fully. "Are you okay?" he inquired, his voice mild yet filled with concern. She nodded, but the untruth felt heavy on her lips. She wasn't fine. She had not been feeling well for months. The city, which had previously been her playground, now felt like a cage. Every corner contained a recollection of a bitter dream or a shattered promise. She'd been given the opportunity to start over. A position in Paris, a blank canvas for her creations, a means to escape the murmurs and the weight of her mistakes. But that meant abandoning everything behind. It meant abandoning Will. She crossed the room and sat next to him, her hands writhing in her lap. The words she needed to speak were scratching at her throat, but they would not come. How could she explain that staying here was killing her? That the place she'd adored was now a graveyard for her dreams? How could she tell him that she needed to leave, not because she didn't love him, but because she was losing herself? "Will," she said, barely above a whisper. He closed his laptop to give her his undivided attention, and the weight of his gaze made her chest hurt. She wanted to remember him, the way his dark hair fell over his brow, his hands resting gently on his knees, the way he stared at her as if she were the only thing that mattered. But she could not stay for him. Not this time. "I got an offer," she blurted out. "In Paris. A design firm. They want me to lead their next collection." His countenance brightened for a moment, pride in his eyes. "That is wonderful, Electra. You've worked so hard for this." She shook her head, tears forming in the corners of her eyes. "It isn't so straightforward. This is a 2-year deal. I'd have to move. Next week." The air in the room changed, carrying the weight of what she wasn't saying. Will's smile faded into a quiet intensity. "What are you saying?" he inquired, his voice firm but tinged with something primal, something that made her heart wrench. "I can't stay here," she murmured, her words coming out like a confession. "This city is suffocating me. Everything I've built, everything I thought I wanted is crumbling apart. I need to start over. I need to rediscover myself again." He leaned back, his hands raking through his hair, a motion she recognized as an attempt to process and hold himself together. "What about us?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "What will happen to us?" She wanted to reassure him that they could make it work, that distance wasn't a barrier, and that love could cross seas. But she'd seen how long-distance relationships affected people. She'd seen it in her parents, her friends, and the innumerable stories of shattered hearts caused by time zones and missed calls. And she knew herself. She'd pour herself into her work, her new life, and Will would be left waiting for scraps of her attention. He deserved more than that. He deserved someone who would remain. "I love you," she exclaimed, her voice breaking. "But I cannot ask you to wait for me. I can't expect you to put your life on wait while I sort mine out." He looked at her, his gaze yearning for something she couldn't provide. "Is that it?" he inquired, his tone tense. "Are you just leaving?" "I have to," she murmured, the words cutting through her. If I stay, I will lose myself. And if I lose myself, I'll lose you regardless. He rose up and paced the room, his fists clenched. You're not even trying, he remarked, his voice rising. You are rushing away. Do you believe Paris will cure everything? You think leaving me will make you whole? I do not know, she cried, standing in front of him. I'm not sure if it will fix anything, but I know I can't stay here and pretend everything is okay when it isn't. I am drowning, Will, and I can't pull you down with me. He paused, his shoulders slumped, and the room fell silent except for the distant hum of the city. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter and broken. I would have gone with you, he added. I would have followed you anywhere. The word struck her like a fist, robbing her breath. She hadn't contemplated it, hadn't allowed herself to envisage a world in which he would leave his life for her. She couldn't allow him. His profession, family, and roots were all present. She couldn't ask him to give it up, especially because she wasn't sure what she was after. You deserve better than that, she added, her voice shaking. You deserve someone who's here, who's whole, and who can give you everything. He chuckled bitterly, cutting through her. Do not tell me what I deserve. I know what I want. I want you. Hot tears ran down her face. She wanted to run up to him, wrap her arms around him, and believe she could remain. But she couldn't. She had to let go of him, even if it meant breaking herself. I'm so sorry, she said softly, her voice barely holding together. I love you, but I have to do this. He looked at her, his eyes brimming with unshed tears. 7 words, he exclaimed, his voice harsh. That's all it takes to break me. She froze, the weight of his words crushing her. I love you, but I'm leaving you. 7 words, each one piercing her heart, a truth she couldn't escape. She longed to go back and rewrite this moment, but there was no going back. She moved closer, her hand reaching for his, but he backed away, his expression masking agony. Don't, he replied. Just don't, she said, her throat tightening as she turned back to face the balcony. The metropolis spread out before her, unconcerned by her broken heart. She'd depart in a week, fly to Paris, and try to rebuild herself from the ashes of this experience. But she knew deep down that no matter where she went, she'd always take this with her. The memory of Will's eyes, the sound of his voice, and the weight of those 7 words. The days that followed were blurred. Electra packed her life into bags, each one a reminder of what she would leave behind. Will kept away, giving her the space she didn't want but needed. She saw him one last time the night before her trip, when he came to drop off a scarf she had left at his house. He stood at the doorway, jaw tense and gaze remote. Be safe, he added, his tone bland. Be happy. She wanted to assure him she'd try and would never stop loving him, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she nodded and clutched the scarf like a lifeline. He turned to leave, and the sound of the door closing rang in her chest. The aircraft travel to Paris seemed to last forever. She looked out the window, watching the clouds glide by, and wondered if she had made the correct decision. Paris was stunning, bustling, and everything she had hoped for. But it was not home. Will's chuckle, his hand in hers, and the peaceful moments they'd spent felt like home. She'd left home, and no amount of accomplishment could fill the void. In the months that followed, Electra devoted herself to her work. Her designs were bolder, rawer, and filled with emotion she couldn't express. Critics praised her collection as revolutionary, demonstrating her skill. But each doodle and stitch was a letter to Will, an apology she would never send. She heard from common acquaintances that he was doing well, and had started seeing someone fresh. The news stung, but she couldn't blame him. She had made her choice. Sometimes, late at night, when the city was quiet and her apartment felt too large, she would pull out the scarf he had given her. It still smelled faintly of him, of cedar and coffee, and she wrapped it around her shoulders to remind herself. She'd murmur those 7 words to the empty room, a litany of her regret. I love you, but I'm leaving you. And somewhere across an ocean Will continued on, his heart bruised but throbbing. A man who had loved and lost but refused to die. Los Angeles continued on, its lights never dimming, its ambitions never fading, even as 2 hearts struggled to find their way in a world that seemed a little less bright. Electra stood at the edge of the terrace, looking out at the shimmering city lights of Los Angeles, Her palms pushed on the icy railing. The night air wrapped around her like a heavy shawl, yet she felt nothing. No shiver, no resistance. Behind her, through the large glass doors, the laughter of a gathering resonated softly, but here in the silence it was just her, the sky, and the words she knew she had to speak. She had practiced, reduced, and sculpted them into something both simple and devastating. 7 words. She was only 7 years old when her entire life changed. Will approached her from behind, his stride slow but cautious, as if he could hear the fury brewing in her chest. "Electra," he whispered softly, his voice evoking the warmth that had once been her anchor. She closed her eyes briefly. She could almost see that voice promising indefinitely, whispering dreams, creating scenarios that would never come true. She turned slowly, and in his face she saw everything: hope, bewilderment, love, faint lines of anxiety etched from nights spent waiting for her, worried about her, and attempting to reach her over the peaceful distance she had created. His dark eyes searched hers, looking for something he couldn't identify. She longed to hold him. She wished to let him hug her. But even if she did, she would never get the courage to say the words. Her lips trembled when she finally spoke. 7 words. Only 7. "I can't be what you need." The silence that followed sounded louder than any thunder. Will blinked as if the words had hit him physically, his breath halting in his chest. His mouth opened, closed, and then opened again, but no sound emerged. She looked away, unable to take seeing the way his face broke. They have spent years creating something frail yet lovely. The kind of connection that people spoke about, envied, and feared. The sort that burned too intensely to endure. They had struggled for each other, against family rejection, their own errors, and the city's unrelenting temptation to swallow them both whole. However, sometimes battling wasn't enough. Sometimes love wasn't enough. Will eventually spoke, his voice raw. "You do not mean that. Tell me you don't." Electra fixed her gaze on the skyline, the distant lights of Los Angeles fading through her tears. "I wish I hadn't. I hope I could embody everything you see in me. But I can't. Not anymore," he said, stepping closer so that she could feel his presence like heat against her back. His hand hovered near hers, longing to touch but frightened to. "Then let me help you," he begged. "Let me be what you need, even if you believe you cannot do the same. That is love, Electra. That's what we promised." Her throat tightened. She had a dream about hearing such words once. But now they're merely cutting deeper. She shook her head slowly. "You do not comprehend. I have tried. I have tried so hard. Every day I put on a face, smiled when I was crying, and told you I was fine when I was not. I can't keep asking you to love a ghost of who I used to be." Will's breath caught. "You are not a ghost. You are still you. The same woman I." He paused, swallowing hard, but the word hung in the air, unspoken but apparent. "Love. Always love." She turned to face him again, pushing herself to gaze into his eyes and see the devastation there. She stretched out to touch his cheek, her fingers quivering. "You deserve someone who can stand next to you without collapsing. Someone who can fantasize, quarrel, and laugh with you without pushing it. That is no longer who I am. I can't keep dragging you down into my darkness." The tears she'd fought back flowed out. He pressed her hand against his face, urgently trying to anchor her. "Don't do this," he whispered. "Electra, please don't walk away. We can make it through this. Whatever you are carrying, we can bear it together. Don't tell me we battled this long and hard just to end like this." Each word was a knife. Every plea made her want to submit, to drop into his arms and pretend everything was fine. However, feigning had already cost them too much. She remembered the nights she had grieved silently beside him, the mornings she had faked a smile to reassure him, and how she had disguised her grief because she couldn't stand to burden him. He deserved the truth, not pretense, even if the reality crushed them both. "I'm leaving Los Angeles," she finally murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. "We'll freeze. Leaving. I cannot stay here. Everywhere I turn I see memories of us and what we strive to build. I need to go somewhere where I can breathe again. Somewhere I can figure out who I am without dragging you through the rubble." His grip on her fingers tightened, desperate and afraid. "Don't. Do not mention that. Do not do this. If you leave, you are walking away from more than just me. You are walking away from everything we have, were, and could be. Don't you see? You are my heart, Electra. You always have been. She broke down silently, sobbing, since hearing it was both lovely and horrible. I'll always love you, she confessed. But love is not always enough. If I stay, we're going to destroy ourselves. And I'd rather leave while we still have anything to remember than stay till we're only left with regret. Will's voice trembled. Is that it? 7 words and you're gone? Just like that? It's not like that, she said vehemently. It's been years of fighting, breaking, and pretending. It's me recognizing I can't keep being the reason you're hurt. Please don't hate me for this. His chest heaved as if he were choking back a scream. He let her hand go, backing back as if the distance would protect him from the pain. His eyes glistened in the dark terrace light. I could never hate you, he remarked with a raspy voice. That's the problem. They stood there silently, the distance between them suddenly greater than oceans. She remembered him in that moment, the slope of his jaw, the way his shoulders bowed under the weight of what she had just done, the way his eyes implored her not to leave even as they filled with comprehension. Then, before she lost her courage, she turned and left. Each stride down the corridor seemed like pulling another piece of her soul away. She could hear no footsteps or voices behind her. Just silence. The kind of silence that indicated that things had ended. When she got to the elevator, she pressed her forehead against the cold metal doors and let out deep, quiet cries that shook her body. She recalled the life they had imagined, the evenings they had whispered plans into the darkness, and the pledges they had etched into each other's hearts. All gone, undone by 7 words. I can't be what you need. They rang in her head, a mantra she would remember long after the jet flew her away from Los Angeles, Will, and the love she couldn't keep. But deep down, she hoped he'd heal and meet someone who could offer him the love she'd always wanted but couldn't keep. And as much as it pained her heart, she knew it was the only way to keep them both from drowning in each other's sorrow and constructing a future on crumbling foundations. She closed her eyes as the elevator doors slid closed, separating her from the man she loved and sealing her fate. And in the dark, she repeated the phrases to herself. I can't be what you need. Because sometimes the cruelest form of love is the one that understands when to let go.